roughly 27 million people fall victim to human trafficking. According to the 2023 Global Slavery Index, over 1 million individuals endure modern slavery within the United States alone. These staggering figures almost numb us to the severity of the issue. 27 million is merely a statistic until it includes someone you love, a family member or a friend. How does a horror like human trafficking balloon to such an unimaginable scale? The answer is as unsettling as it is straightforward. It begins with us. It starts with consuming pornography and feeding a billion-dollar industry. And as we pour money into this machine, it expands, targeting, quote, new customers, namely children. In America, the average age of first exposure to porn is just 11 years old. Consider this. What kind of sexual preferences will a boy steeped in regular pornography develop by the time he's 18? How about when he's 25 or 30, or even 65, assuming that it still functions? By then, tame images won't suffice him. His taste will demand something far more extreme. The sexual revolution sold us a myth that sex detached from marriage and openness to life could be liberating. Instead, it's left a trail of devastation, pain, and emptiness. So what's the fallout? At its mildest, it's turned Americans into sex-obsessed, perpetually dissatisfied people, always craving more, escalating to the point where schools now teach kids how to navigate safely. But at its worst, it's shattered families and ended unborn lives. And for what? Unrestrained sex without consequences or commitment? Has it been worth it? Are we happier? Healthier? The evidence says no, we're neither. It's a tragedy that this view is now unpopular, but the sexual revolution's unspoken core is clear. It reduces others to mere objects for our own gratification. To dig in deeper into this grave crisis around human trafficking, I've asked a courageous and incredibly smart man who has dedicated his life to fighting human trafficking in America to join us. Jaco Booyens, welcome to the Terry Schilling Show.
Terry, thank you so much. It's a pleasure and an honor.
Well, thank you so much, sir. And I just want to get into it. Can you tell us a little bit more about your ministry? I know you have a passionate story about how you got into this. So give us a little bit of background about how you got into this fight and what you guys are focused on right now.
Yeah, JBM, which is Jaco Booyens Ministries, but in short, JBM is an anti-trafficking organization. 2025 is our 31st year in the fight against human trafficking, 30 plus years. Started in 1994 when my sister Ilanka, at that time 12 years old, I was 18 in 1994. She was trafficked at age 12 for 6 years until right before her 19th birthday. It's a chilling story. Her testimony is riveting. It is an exposure of how dark a human being's mind can get, how dark predators are, how prevalent evil is in our midst. And so it set us on a trajectory to fight, and we've never stopped. The ministry today has 4 core pillars: awareness, prevention. We're doing this here today. You're bringing awareness, and by default, it helps to prevent the crime from being perpetuated. A ton of training, a lot of curriculum, training law enforcement, et cetera, et cetera. Rescue and rescue support, weekly rescues of American children. Our focus is in the 50 states of the United States. And then we have what's called restoration and support of those who are survivors. We build safe houses for children called the Way Ranch, where we take children in, and it's the work done to restore a life that has been broken sexually is the toughest challenge. For those in that aftercare or survivor care community, it's very hard work. And then lastly, one of our biggest elements is policy and legislation. We move a tremendous amount of policy and legislation in all 50 states. Half our team is testifying today. We testify every week on case-related policy that feeds the beast. And it's often things that people don't expect is tethered to this crime of trafficking in persons, or what we call human trafficking.
Jaco, I'm wondering, can you talk a little bit more about, and I'm going to get into this later in the show, but the legislation that you're working to pass, is it primarily support for the victims to help them recover, or is it going to cracking down and giving more resources to law enforcement so that they can crack down? What ultimately is your goal ultimately for policy?
Yeah, our policy division is really, really strong. And I look, all glory goes to God, but I'm very proud of our policy division. Last year in 2024 alone, our organization tracked 900 bills in this country. 900 bills that have anything to do with children, and it crosses the whole gambit. Of the 900, we helped write on 60. They all became law. It's everything from stricter penalties. I'll give you an example. I've got some of the bills. We're testifying today on HB 1090, for instance. It's the Student Reporting Act. To give you an example, over 47 states in this country, superintendents have sovereign immunity. So there's sex crimes within the school that's being reported to campus police, where the superintendent has sovereign immunity. They do not have to report it outside to law enforcement. In Texas alone, we tracked 6,800 sex crime cases that have been reported in school that's not reported to law enforcement, not investigated, not prosecuted. So that's one bill, for instance. How important is that bill? How important is it that parents know that, hey, if a child goes to school, over 600 of these cases were teachers, the perpetrators. They're still teaching. So the Sovereign Immunity Act, for instance, keep child safe in school. Digital safety for students, which is HB 3702 that we passed. It's in 14 states now. It's the only digital data bill to remove digital content and bring direct prosecution, where law enforcement can now come in and a parent can sue an individual teacher and not just say, well, it's the curriculum, or it's the State Department of Education, or it's the U.S. Department of Education. Liability now comes down to the individual teacher, because we find that teachers individually superimpose their sexual preferences into the classroom. That's, for instance, a bill that should be federal. And in the State Curriculum Act, HB 995, and I can go on and on. So there's 17 bills right now, this year, that we are championing across this country. And in one of the bills we helped on, which is 1181, we're in the Supreme Court. And I just want you to think about this, how important policy is. The general American that's halfway sane, that loves this country just a little bit, that knows who God is and doesn't even have an intimate relationship with God, would probably agree that children should not access porn free, readily available. Mm-hmm. Okay, that should not happen. Americans are not aware that the greatest defense for porn being free on YouTube, where an 8-year-old can access it, right, is actually the conservative movement. It's a freedom of speech defense. It's a First Amendment defense. So it's not just on the left, but on the right too. We grapple with this thing. So the bill is now escalated from a local Texas court all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States, where the Supreme Court says it is the most important bill of their session in 2025, and it's the age verification bill. All we're saying is, if an adult wants to exercise their First Amendment rights and speak the way they want to and go view porn and have a porn account, they've got to verify their age through a 3-tiered system. The defense is that we're placing an undue burden on American citizens, violating their constitutional right in the First Amendment to ask an adult to disclose their age. My argument is, because you don't age verify, the average age of porn entry is 11, because you find graphic porn free on YouTube. This is what we're grappling with, though, Terry. Americans have to understand these things all feed into the demand cycle, which results in a child being trafficked. By the time a child is trafficked, society has failed that child. So many things happen in the process, right? And so that's just examples of 3 of the 17 bills at the moment. Now, some of them are stricter penalties. Some of them are giving law enforcement the leeway to share information cross jurisdiction. Law enforcement don't share information cross jurisdiction. A girl goes missing in Dallas. We find her in Vegas. This is a real case. Vegas PD doesn't share info with Dallas PD. Dallas not with Vegas PD. There's no central command. You start over, and the predators know this. They know the law. They know the gaps in the law. Family court. The absolute disaster in our country in family court, that predators in familial trafficking sexualize their own children, traffic their own children, and have learned how to manipulate the court to where the broken parent gets custody. The pedophile parent gets custody of the child. The mom who's saying, hey, this dad goes into his daughter's room at night, or the mom is the one telling her son he's not a son, he's a girl, and the father saying, I'm trying to defend my child. The predator, predominantly in our country at the moment, gets custody. There's a litany of this stuff that we're working on in policy and legislation that is not obvious that it's connected to trafficking, but it is.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the family trafficking, and that kind of leads into the next part, because I was shocked at how many different ways people get tied into human trafficking and get locked up. Can we play clip A, please?
Is this your PhD program?
PhD program, that's right.
You want to talk a little bit about that?
So yeah, on CobraTate.com, I have my PhD program, and that is PhD is a pimp and hose degree that I'm.
Clever.
And
Clever.
That teaches basically how I got girls, how I met girls, how I got girls to like me, how I got girls to fall in love with me to work on webcam for me. Because that's what I did. That was my MO, was find girls, make them love me, and make them work for me. And that's how I got rich. So that teaches everything I know from start to finish about not only getting girls, not only obtaining them, but retaining them. Because that's a completely different game as well. Mm-hmm. So I teach everything I know in there.
I mean, look, you know that's Andrew Tate. He is hot off the press. He's a hot commodity right now. Everyone's trying to have him on their podcast, it seems, lately. He's an absolute scumbag. I mean, the smirk on his face as he's openly bragging about sex trafficking girls and fooling them into selling their bodies and their purity is absolutely disgusting. I mean, this is like who dads need to be protecting their kids from. In fact, like Andrew Tate is the guy that, dads used to clean their shotguns on the front porch when their daughter would bring a guy home, and it was to fend off jerks and scumbags like Andrew Tate. But he uses this thing called the Romeo method, and that's when you trick a girl to make them feel like you're in love with them and coerce them into this. What are some of the other methods that these guys use? I know that they just flat out abduct girls, but what are some of the other methods that they use to get these girls into human trafficking?
Yeah, and look, share my opinion here, and I just got to, because you brought it up, the lead prosecutor on that case against the Tate brothers is a friend of mine. And remember, the definition, which we helped write in 2015, our nation didn't even have a definition for minor sexual exploitation, is the exploitation of persons through the mechanisms of force, fraud, and coercion. That's a definition of human trafficking. He just admitted. He admitted that he defrauds people. He admitted that to work for me on webcams. He admitted that there's fraud. He admits to coercion. There's not even a question. There should be no question. And the fact that our nation is making this guy a star and want this guy in every podcast. I ask all the conservative podcasters to really do a gut check. Do you really want to feed the demand cycle and feed the beast that the Tate brothers is touting with millions of minions following them under the guise of that this is masculinity? No, you're right. Clean the shotgun, right? And train your son that this is not a masculine man. This is a highly insecure, finite individual that is a bully that manipulates broken people. So some of the mechanisms used, and just to give you a statistic, only 1.7% of human trafficking is kidnapping. Only. The notion that Americans continue to want to believe from the movie Taken that it's happening somewhere else, or Sound of Freedom for that matter. Sound of Freedom did not do us favors in the fight, because Sound of Freedom brought a hyper attention to migrants, which, yes, migrant children are trafficked into our country. But the most children trafficked in America are not migrant children. It's not the 385,000 kids that a previous administration lost that we're now trying to find. It's American kids living at home, being succumbed to what's called familial trafficking. 22% through 47% of all domestic sex trafficking of children are familial. It's in the family. Why is that effective? For the very thing Andrew Tate brags about. He builds trust. He builds likeness. He builds being loved. He earns the heart of a girl, and then he manipulates them. Familial trafficking, you don't have to build trust. It's embedded. If the man that feeds you dinner, if the man that pays your school fees, if the man that buys you clothes, if the man that takes you on vacation is your trafficker, he doesn't have to build trust. He has it. That's why it's so powerful when a teacher, a parent, a significant other, a familial figure, a coach is the trafficker. Trust is already there. Authority is already there. Well, what does authority do? It brings fear to who? To the victim. They're going to trust him, not me. He's a voice in the community. I am not. He's got all these followers. I don't. Who will believe me against him? He's got power. He's got prestige. A Epstein worked very hard. A Weinstein worked very hard. A Diddy works very hard to build that trust. I'm telling you today in America, trafficking now, the trust is already built in. It's built in. The number one form, and we coined this, and you will see this, and there's no white paper on it yet. We're writing a white paper. The number one tactic today being used by predators to traffic children or adult women is emotional support. Emotional support, no longer Romeo necessarily, because Romeo came with an alter ego. It came with a 42-year-old man posing as a 24-year-old, age-related. They don't do that anymore. They don't need to. They show up as slobby, fat, overweight, disgusting 48-year-old men, and they present themselves as they are. They just know the emotional vulnerability. Remember, human trafficking is the exploitation of vulnerability. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They know how to exploit vulnerability. So let me tether this to you, to our culture real quick. How do you get a group of American citizens who's raised well, who pay $70,000 to $80,000 a year for college tuition to show up at a college campus, okay, defy all logic, and yell, "We are Hamas"? How does that happen? We have to ask. Well, Jaco, what does that have to do with human trafficking? It's got everything to do with human trafficking. It's about human behavioral science. The same forces that understand that you can get a college student to burn the American flag or yell, "We are Hamas," the same tactic is emotional support, emotional manipulation. It's exactly what a trafficker uses. A trafficker looks at a victim, potential victim, a target, and looks at emotional vulnerability and brings emotional support. I hear you. I'm for you. I'm with you. You can talk to me. I don't need to talk back. I'll be your sounding board. I'll be your echo chamber. I'll tell you how you think is right. I'll support your think tank with other voices while I'm starting to shape your thought pattern, manipulate your thought pattern. I'll make you feel valued. I'll make you feel seen and feel heard. Gen Z is the culture in recorded history that runs on feelings the most. Widespread information, surface level deep, no core conviction. You can make them do anything, including burning an American flag, fall in love with a predator, give their heart to a predator, defend the predator, because the predator makes them feel important. The predator makes them feel seen. The predator brings emotional support. This should send chills down every father's spine that's a good guy of how easy it is for a predator to earn, not kidnap, earn their daughter's heart on social media.
Jaco, I want to dig into this a little bit deeper. I had other questions planned, but that a father or mother would gravely hurt their own children for money. It's just so crazy, and it's unthinkable. It's such an inversion of what those parents are supposed to be doing. Can you tell me a little bit, like, give me a scenario for how this plays out? Because like it's tough for me, and I think most normal Americans who aren't caught up into this, it's really tough to picture how this plays out. So here's in my mind, here's how I'm thinking it might play out is, does a dad or a mom go to their 13, 14, 15-year-old daughter and basically say, "Hey, we got to pay the bills, and this is an easy way to do it"? Like, what are the typical scenarios that this happens under?
I'm going to use a case that we're working at the moment, okay? I'll change names and I'll change ages by 2 years, but it's close. So let's say 12 and 15-year-old sisters. At the moment, we're in this case right now, okay? They go to a school in Texas. They're in class every day. One of them plays soccer. They're in class. They show up. They're being trafficked by a grandmother who's the guardian, a grandmother, and the grandmother's boyfriend. They're now 11 and 15. They've been trafficked since they were 4 and 7. okay? There is a litany of reports in the school that they are claiming that they're not safe at home. CPS has been to the home, has done nothing. It doesn't happen with a sit-down where a parent sits down and say, you know what, we got to make ends meet, so we're going to sell your body. It's not how it happens. The parent is the predator. First, the parent is broken. The parent often exploits a child for their own gain and then for financial gain. Yes, there are cases where the parent was exploited as a child for food, shelter, love, belonging, whatever it is, safety, whatever, right? And it's a mechanism, it's generational, where they go when they fall into hard times or stress or pressure, they go, was done to me, I'll do it to the child. The child happens to become part of the system. It's not a cognitive decision where the child opts in. However, these two children we're dealing with now, the older one is pregnant by a predator. They go home at night. They're getting violated by a family member and then by others. And there's financial gain. They are now told that this is part of their future, their college tuition. They're now told that this is their contribution to the family. They're now told that if they break the cycle, everybody will be hungry. The CPS will take them away. Now threats come in. They now feel guilty, guilt, shame, condemnation. They live under, all victims do. All victims believe that no victims self-identify. They believe that I did something to cause this to happen, but it's a process. It's first a desensitization, which we call grooming, right? Then it's a violation. Then it's threat that if you talk about this violation, you will get hurt. I'm going to be okay, right? Then this is love. Then it's love and belonging. Now the victim believes this is love. This is Stockholm Syndrome, where a woman is on camera, her head's being bounced off the floor by a predator, and she stands in court and defends him. How does that happen? Because we're human beings. There's science, real science, neuroscience inside us, where emotion, feeling, soul, body, spirit. If the predator can convince the victim that this is love, this is family, we are in this together, I'm with you. It's no different than how you get an MS-13 member to get a 13-year-old kid to commit crime for the love of the tribe, the gang, and defend it. It's the same mechanisms. But now it's in the family. Do you know how difficult this fight is to fight for us, Terry, when it's in the family? To find it in the family. Because if a child gets kidnapped, the lights go on, the dogs come out, community stops, the child's missing. Let's go. Where was she last seen? What did she wear? The child that walks into the classroom that last night had to give to 3 of her dad's friends, which, by the way, doesn't take hours. People go, if that happens, I would know. No, you don't. Sarah turns left this afternoon. Instead of turning right to the bus stop, she's walking 2 blocks over. 90 seconds later, she performed. She's back on the bus and she goes home. She's playing soccer. This is so prevalent in our community. Well, why? We made a documentary that's being released this year, okay? We take a 90-year look since 1933. We take a 90-year look at the moral decline of the American culture all the way through John Dewey, Fritz Belusek, Hitler, Alfred Kinsey, Hugh Hefner, the Love is Love movement, Man-Boy Love Association. We walk it all the way to 2024. And at 2023, we pause at a question, what is a woman? You can't ask what is a woman if you don't get American men to objectify women to the point where American women now traffic themselves. They objectify themselves. You've got college students signing up for OnlyFans and Sugar Baby University at the rate of nuts. They're exploiting themselves. Gen Z is the #1 generation making pornography on themselves, selling their own pornography with no pimp and no trafficker. What do you do with a case like another case, a 16-year-old we have, where we rescue her, she's being trafficked, and there's no trafficker? There's no trafficker. She is the trafficker. She's got dissociation disorder. There's 5 or more personalities, and there's no trafficker. She's become a recruiter. She's recruiting other 16-year-olds into her circle. She's selling herself because we've made it possible. Whether it's Section 230 cover, or nobody wants to talk about the impact of porn, or nobody in the House or the Senate and Congress has the moxie to actually really look at what's going on in the metaverse and what's really going on social media. And now you've got a society that there's not even a trafficker. The victim is the trafficker. It's unbelievably difficult to identify the victims and then rescue them from their family, from themselves, right? We have a cultural, moral implosion at the moment. And by the way, you don't fix it from the Oval Office. This is not something a president fixes. It is a moral crisis. And then to sweeten the pie for evil, the church has bought into the system. The church has bought into it. Well, we can't talk about pornography. Only 22% of pastors in 2024 mentioned pornography in a sermon. It's not talked about. Yet, 55% of Christians in the American church have porn accounts. This is a cultural crisis.
No, it's so dark. It's so disturbing. There is a systematic, or it's systemic though, right? I mean, there's a lot from the bottom, but you did just a fantastic job just now of explaining why there are all these crazy programs in school, why there's Drag Queen Story Hour, why they're pushing transgenderism on kids, and why they're teaching them how to have safe sessions. It's because they're normalizing the disordered. They're normalizing disordered activities so that we can't differentiate between normal and good and bad and disordered, right? And it's a lot easier. It's so interesting that you're explaining this entire scenario because, there were always kids in school, and mostly girls, who would wear black makeup and dark, and they were depressed, and they didn't really talk to anyone. They didn't really have a lot of friends. And I'm thinking, was this going on, in my hometown? And the numbers that you're putting out there, probably.
Yes. You're now nailing it. Now, thank you for having a real conversation. Now you're nailing it. Until we take account and accountability. But biblically, I'm a Christian. That's my faith, right? And I live by the Word of God. It says, look at the log in my eye before I look at the splinter of another. We always want to find the Epstein or the foreign governments or the cartels. American men are the number one buyers of sex. American men are the number one buyers of child porn, CSAM material. That's a fact. The 385,000 children that are here are being sold for sex. They're being sold to American men. This is accountability hour. We went through a whole bullying movement for a decade, the anti-bullying movement, and I was beating a drum from 2010 to 2020 saying, you're missing it. The bully is being sexually abused at home at over 50% of the time. The bully is coming to school to take power back, yet nobody is asking, is there sexual violence at home? Could there be trafficking? The girl is dressing goth, who all of a sudden had this transformation. She had a peer group, now she doesn't. She's literally hiding in plain sight, and you're allowing her to because she's likely a sex slave at home. Maybe not trafficked, but maybe just to a father. We are not asking the right questions in society. And then we let the elite, who are never boots on the ground, the Ivy Leagues, right, who siphon off money from wherever to do their studies, we let them tell us what culture is really like. Meanwhile, people are in the trenches, and that information does not flow up to say, look, hey guys, I know Harvard had the study, but Harvard's study is trash. Alfred Kinsey wrote the book on the sexuality of the world's youth, a pedophile. Our model penal code, still today, the law in the model penal code in the sex offense section in the U.S. penal code was written by a pedophile, Alfred Kinsey. Like, who in their right mind would say, well, that's a good idea? It's not. This is why you have the obscenity exemption statutes from 1970, 71, 72. This is 30 years of my life. This is what I do 20 hours a day. The statutes protect pornography in school. The statutes protect the desensitization of children.
No, you're right on the obscenity exemption statutes, though. It's so insane how we've written that, and you're right. It's based off of Alfred Kinsey, and he was a demented sexual deviant who wanted to spread sexual deviancy throughout the entire world. But he was so dark and twisted. And then these obscenity exemption statutes, it's literally where you can show a kid porn in school, but if you walk across the street to the park and show them that same exact material, you go to jail. It is absolutely crazy. I do want to get into the porn industry, though. And I have some stats here. There's so much money pouring into this. It's absolutely insane. The porn industry's annual revenue is more than the NFL, NBA, and MLB combined.
That's right.
And then those profits go somewhere, right? Where do those go?
Those profits go to line the pockets. Man, research this for yourself. Look into it for yourself. And just ask this question. If it's $12 billion, larger than the NFL, MLB, okay, NBA combined, well, who's banking that money? And what mechanism is it banked through? Is it flowing through our financial institution? Of course it is. Of course it is. There's really, really big fundamental problems in our culture. You should not be able to bank marijuana legally, and you're not. You can't bank marijuana, but you can bank the exploitation of people.
Yeah.
Come on. What does that say? My question is this, right? What does it say about the American culture? We're sick. We're ill. We need surgery.
Yeah, no, this stuff has been so normalized. I want to pull up the number. We were going over the numbers of men that consume pornography, and like the percents are so terrible. So there are 115 million men who are aged 13 to 65. And if you do the percentage, 75% of them, or I'm sorry, 78% of them, that's 90 million men that are consuming pornography at least monthly. It's
more in perspective. Let's put this straight. That's more. I want people just to understand tangibly how that's more than the amount of votes President Trump received to become president of the United States.
It's amazing we win any elections at all, right? I mean, with that type of use of pornography, that should mean super majorities. And obviously, I think there is a political aspect to it, right? I think the tyrants have understood that the more sexually broken they make people, the more that they disorder them, the more Democrat voters are going to be.
100%, because I can prove this to you. A human being that is sexually broken does not care about First Amendment, Second Amendment, constitutional values, Bill of Rights. They will become part of a system that says the government has to take care of me. This is Jaco Booyens' opinion, okay? But I can back it up. Over 30 years of expertise as a subject matter expert, right? The most effective tool on planet Earth to destroy a society and drive them to socialism and communism is sexual deviancy. The Romans knew this. The Mayans knew this. Porn is outlawed in China, but there's porn on TikTok in America. You don't think that they understand that if you get American Gen Z hooked on porn, you will erode this culture? You will break her to the core? You're not going to break America with economic peril. You're not going to break America with a military action. You're not going to do it. A recession, a depression. This nation stands up. They break her sexually. The Americans are selling their own children. So now you want to talk about defending a child in the womb? Why would they defend a child in the womb if they're willing to sell their own child? Why would they not sell their own child if they're willing to get rid of a child in the womb?
Well, Jaco, but you're getting onto something here real quick. I mean, I believe that, there's industries behind all of these terrible things, right? There's a whole transgender industry that makes, there's big pharmaceutical companies and surgeons and hospitals that make money off of that. But when it comes to abortion, right? Who's making money from abortion, and who needs abortion more than anyone? It's sex traffickers, right? Because these girls that are 13, 14, 15 years old, it'll get caught pretty quick, and people will find out that they're being sex trafficked when it's like, well, who's the dad? Oh, it's this 45-year-old guy. Well, we got to get rid of the evidence. There are industries behind all of these horrible things, like the abortion industry.
The case I mentioned to you earlier of the 11 and 15-year-old, where the older one is pregnant by the trafficker, right? I have a child. I just want your viewers to understand. This is so visceral. They should vomit. They should vomit. This should disturb them. They shouldn't sleep. That we are a culture that says we're one nation under God, and this exists here. That child sits in front of me. I'm not a bureaucrat that sits in an elected office that just makes policy. We make policy out of necessity because on the ground, people are dying, right? This child looks me in the eye, sitting in her own school, and tells me that she wants to commit that day because she doesn't know how to get rid of the child in her womb, because the trafficker can't sell her often enough if she's pregnant. And the trafficker may get caught if we ask who is the father. We have in our documentary firsthand testimony of whistleblowers that will tell you that they injected children in the 90s, 80s, and 90s with a hepatitis B shot to destroy the evidence of familial and trafficking, so that there would not be a trace of a sexually transmitted disease, so the child wouldn't get an STD. Do you know who advised the federal government to give Hep B shots to children? Alfred Kinsey. Talk to nurses. This is demented. Destroying the evidence, right? So yes, abortion, so nobody... Traffickers love abortion. Absolutely love it. Traffickers are the best friends with Margaret Sanger's mantra. So was Alfred Kinsey. Sanger was one of his best friends, right? 100%. Abortion is tied to human trafficking. Don't get me into organ harvesting. We don't have time. I'll bring you experts in this country. It is connected because it's effective.
Yeah.
It works. It works. It is driving this nation to her knees.
So, Jaco, I'll just tell you, I have 7 kids. They're vaccinated. We're cautious about this stuff. We slow walk it, but it's always come up between my wife and I. Why are we doing Hep B? Why are we doing Hep C? Like, these are like for sexually transmitted diseases. This is not normal. Like, our kids, we're going to raise them right. They're not going to get into this stuff, but it makes so much more sense. Jaco, I could talk to you. You've opened my eyes to a lot of different things today, connected a lot of dots. I want to eventually have you back on. Can you tell people where they can find out more about you and follow you online? Because I want to promote everything that you're doing as much as I possibly can.
Larry, thank you. And I know I'm verbose, and I'm sorry if I talked over you at times, but it's with the utmost respect that I'm on your show. I cannot thank you enough that you're willing to have this conversation. People go to help JBM, Juliet Bravo Mike, helpjbm.org. All the resources are free for parents. How do I talk to my child? How do I see trafficking? What should be in my kids' schools and whatnot? Which bills are in my state? There's a deluge of information for them. They can join the fight. We are a 501c3. We raise support to rescue kids. They can support us, but really we want to fortify their family. And then follow me on Instagram. A lot of other channels block us, but on Instagram is our premier channels, Jaco.Booyens. Can't thank you enough. God bless you. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Jaco. And I know how dark this, we've been fighting the trans fight, and that gets really dark, but you're in a whole other world of darkness. And I'm just so glad that God gave you as a light to this world to help defend the vulnerable and help the helpless. So thank you so much for joining us, and look forward to having you back on.
Thank you, Ted. Bless you.